The White House sent Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, and the man who rebuilt Cantor Fitzgerald from the ashes of 9/11, to confront Prime Minister Mark Carney on live BBC television. No time limits, no pre-approved topics, no safety net. The administration's strategy was explicit. Put a proven Wall Street operator across from the Canadian leader, expose Ottawa's position as economically illiterate, and demonstrate to the world that America still had the intellectual firepower to win this crisis on the merits. The broadcast lasted 41 minutes. Lutnick did not land a single substantive point. What Carney did to him on camera, methodically, quietly, with the surgical patience of a man who has spent 3 decades mastering the exact material his opponent was pretending to understand, is already being called the most devastating public dismantling of a senior government official in modern diplomatic history. Trump watched the broadcast live from the residence with a group of senior advisors. According to 4 people who were in the room, he didn't make it to the end. He left at approximately the 32-minute mark after a particular exchange that will become one of the most replayed moments of this entire crisis. What happened after Trump left, what he said, what he demanded, what he did, is something his own staff is describing off the record and with visible unease as the worst reaction they have ever witnessed from this president. Not the angriest, not the most frustrated, the worst. The mismatch between the two men was not a matter of preparation or talking points. It was a mismatch of universes. The White House chose Lutnick because his resume shines on paper. He rebuilt a firm that lost 2/3 of its workforce on 9/11, turned it into a financial powerhouse, and built a reputation as the smartest person in any negotiation. But the man sitting across from him was Mark Carney, a PhD in economics from Oxford, 13 years at Goldman Sachs, rising to managing director, then governor of the Bank of Canada, where he steered the country through 2008 with what the IMF called the most effective crisis management of any advanced economy. Then he became the first non-British citizen ever appointed governor of the Bank of England, managing the system through Brexit and the European debt crisis. He also chaired the Financial Stability Board, effectively the chief architect of post-2008 global financial regulation. The White House sent a man who made money on Wall Street to debate a man who regulated Wall Street, governed 2 central banks, redesigned the global financial stability framework, and holds a doctorate in the subject Lutnick was pretending to understand. The BBC broadcast, simulcast across 37 countries and watched by an estimated 90 million people, opened with 2-minute opening statements. Lutnick went first, aggressive, confident, arguing that the United States is Canada's largest trading partner, its largest source of foreign investment, its most important security guarantor, and that Carney's confrontational approach was economic suicide. He cited America's GDP, its military spending, its consumer market, its technological dominance. For 2 minutes, if you knew nothing about the underlying economics, he sounded like he was winning. Then Carney spoke. His opening was quiet, measured, and devastatingly specific. He did not raise his voice. He simply recited numbers. He noted that while the U.S. is Canada's largest trading partner, Canada is also the largest export destination for the United States, purchasing more American goods than China and Japan combined. He noted that the U.S. runs a services surplus with Canada of over $28 billion annually. He noted that suspended Canadian energy exports had been saving American consumers over $40 billion per year compared to alternative global sources, and that the suspension had already cost American households an estimated $19 billion. He noted that suspended Canadian critical minerals supply over 60% of the rare earth elements used in American defense manufacturing, and that the Pentagon had formally assessed the suspension as a critical vulnerability. Each number landed like a brick through a window. The first exchange after opening statements set the pattern for the remaining 37 minutes. Lutnick tried to reframe the crisis as Canadian aggression, arguing that the energy suspension, diplomatic severance, and trade realignment were disproportionate. Carney responded by listing chronologically with dates every American action that had preceded Canada's responses: the initial tariffs, the demand for the Prime Minister's resignation, the steel ultimatum. He presented them as a sequence, each escalation by Washington, each Canadian response a reaction. Then he asked Lutnick directly, "Which of these responses would you characterize as the first move?" "I'll wait." Lutnick paused, began to respond, stopped, then pivoted to a different argument entirely. That pivot, the visible on-camera decision to abandon a line of argument because the answer was indefensible, happened at the 6-minute mark. There were 35 minutes left. The middle section was an extended exercise in asymmetric warfare. Lutnick attacked with talking points, Carney defended with data. Lutnick argued that the Democratic Commerce Alliance was an anti-American trade bloc. Carney calmly read the alliance's founding charter, which explicitly welcomes American participation, and asked, "Have you read the charter, Secretary Lutnick?" Lutnick had not, and his silence confirmed it. Lutnick argued that Canadian steel companies would come crawling back to the American market once tariff pressure forced economic reality. Carney pulled up a tablet showing binding 10-year supply agreements with DCA nations, capital investment figures for retooled production lines, and forward contract volumes locking Canadian steel into European and Asian markets through 2036. "These are signed contracts, Secretary," he said, binding 10-year with penalty clauses for early termination. "The steel isn't coming back because it can't." Lutnick's response, "Well, we'll see about that," was delivered with the confidence of a man performing assurance rather than experiencing it. Lutnick then tried the emotional angle, speaking about American workers, families, communities suffering because of Canada's punitive actions. For a brief moment, the emotional gravity seemed to shift the dynamic. Then Carney responded, "Secretary Lutnick, I want to take your concern for American workers seriously because I share it. So let's look at the numbers. The steel tariff your president signed has increased American home construction costs by an average of $53,000 per unit. The energy suspension, which is a response to your president's demand that I resign, is costing American households $19 billion this year. The airspace closure, a response to the diplomatic severance your president initiated, is costing American airlines $3.2 billion annually. Every cost you just described is a cost imposed on American workers not by Canada, but by the decisions of your own administration. I have the receipts. Would you like me to continue, or would you prefer to tell American workers who is actually responsible for their suffering?" And then came the exchange that will be studied for years. At approximately the 31-minute mark, Lutnick attempted a final pivot. "The fact that I'm here, Secretary to Prime Minister, shows that America is willing to engage. We're at the table. We're ready to talk. We want a path forward." Carney listened, nodded slightly, and asked a question. 7 words delivered with the quiet precision of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "What exactly are you offering Canada today?" Silence. Lutnick opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His eyes moved left, right, down, the involuntary motion of someone searching for an answer that doesn't exist. The silence lasted approximately 8 seconds. In live television, that is an eternity. 90 million viewers could hear the ventilation system in the BBC studio, because the answer was nothing. Lutnick had no offer. The United States had no proposal, no framework for resolution, no concession, no path forward. The White House had sent its sharpest economic mind not to negotiate, but to argue, to score points, to project strength, to perform engagement without the substance of engagement. Carney's 7-word question had stripped that performance bare. Real-time social media analytics showed the single highest spike in engagement ever recorded during a live political broadcast. Twitter registered over 400,000 posts in the 60 seconds following the question. The most shared commentary came from a former United States trade representative, a Republican appointee, who posted, "He doesn't have an answer because there isn't an answer. We never made one." Bloomberg's live analysis terminal issued a 1-line market alert. U.S. Commerce Secretary unable to articulate U.S. offer on Canada. Strategic void confirmed on live broadcast. Futures markets moved before the debate ended. The dollar weakened against the euro, the pound, and the Canadian dollar simultaneously, a pattern currency analyst said reflected an instantaneous global repricing of American negotiating credibility. Carney let the silence do its work. He did not fill it, did not mock, did not press. He waited 3 seconds, 5, 8. With the patience of someone who understood that the silence was more eloquent than any words he could add. Then he leaned slightly forward, looked directly at Lutnick, and delivered 5 words in the same quiet register. "Send someone who can say yes." The broadcast continued for another 9 minutes, but it was over. Within 20 minutes, those 5 words were the top trending phrase on every major social media platform globally. Within an hour, they were the headline on every major newspaper's digital edition. International media called it the sentence that ended the last American argument for engagement because it exposed the fundamental problem. The United States had been arguing, threatening, demanding, performing, and escalating for 18 months, but at no point had it made an offer. There was no plan. There had never been a plan. Trump left the room immediately after the "What exactly are you offering" exchange before the 5 words were even delivered. According to 2 sources, he swept a stack of briefing materials off a side table as he stood. According to a third, he turned to the chief of staff and said at a volume audible to everyone in the room, "That's the guy you told me would win? That's the sharpest mind in the cabinet?" He got destroyed on live television in front of the entire world by a guy who runs a country the size of California. Get him off my TV. Get him out of my cabinet. And find me somebody who can beat Carney, because apparently nobody in this building can. The irony of that last demand was not lost on the advisors in the room. They had already sent the person they believed was their best. The bench was empty. One senior advisor later told a colleague, he kept asking who we could send next. We went through names: Treasury, State, NSC, trade envoys, outside surrogates. For every name, someone had a reason it wouldn't work. The trade rep doesn't have the presence. The Treasury Secretary doesn't know the Canada file. The Secretary of State has no economic credibility. We went around the table 3 times, and then someone said the thing nobody wanted to say. The only person who could credibly face Carney is the president himself. And everyone in the room knew that was impossible, not because of scheduling, but because of capability. That assessment, that the president could not be sent to negotiate with the Prime Minister of Canada because his own staff doubted his ability to hold his own in a substantive exchange, leaked 48 hours later and became the single most damaging internal revelation of the entire crisis. Warren Buffett's response arrived the next morning. "I didn't watch a debate last night," Buffett said. "I watched a diagnostic. The diagnosis is that the United States does not currently have a strategy for its most important economic relationship. It has tactics, it has impulses, it has threats, but it does not have a strategy. And now the whole world knows it." Buffett introduced what he called the empty chair principle. In any negotiation, the most important person is not the one sitting across from you, but the one who isn't in the room and has the authority to decide. If that person refuses to show up, refuses to engage directly, refuses to put an offer on the table, it means either they don't take the negotiation seriously or they don't have a position to negotiate from. In either case, Buffett said, the negotiation is already over. What remains is theater. That's what last night was. Very expensive, very public, very humiliating content, but not a negotiation, because a negotiation requires an offer and America doesn't have one. Buffett then laid out 4 strategic errors, each compounding the one before. First, demanding Carney's resignation eliminated political leverage by unifying Canada behind its leader. Second, falling asleep at the UN eliminated credibility by demonstrating that America wasn't paying attention while the world reorganized. Third, the steel ultimatum eliminated economic leverage by pushing Canadian industry into alternative markets now locked in with 10-year contracts. Fourth, sending Lutnick to a debate with no offer, no proposal, and no authority to negotiate eliminated the last remaining asset, the perception that America was serious about resolution. After the first error, Canada knew it had to fight. After the second, it knew it could win. After the third, it knew the world was on its side. And after last night, it knows something worse. It knows there is nobody on the other side of the table. Not because America chose not to send someone, but because America doesn't have someone to send. The chair isn't empty by choice. It's empty by default. And an adversary who discovers that the other side's chair is empty doesn't negotiate harder. They stop negotiating entirely. The international reaction moved at velocity. The European Commission president issued a statement praising Carney's substantive, data-driven approach and pointedly noting that the DCA welcomes engagement from all parties who come to the table with concrete proposals. Japan's trade minister called the debate clarifying and announced an acceleration of Japan's timeline for full DCA integration. The United Kingdom's foreign secretary said the debate underscored the urgency of building resilient economic frameworks that do not depend on the policy stability of any single partner, diplomatic English for "we can no longer rely on the United States." India, which had requested observer status after the steel ultimatum, formally applied for full membership within 48 hours. The DCA now counts 16 full members and 3 observers, representing collectively over 52% of global GDP. Each American era added members. The debate was no exception. Domestically, a national poll conducted within 72 hours found that 61% of Americans had watched at least some portion of the broadcast, and of those, 67% said Carney had clearly won. More damaging, among self-identified Republican voters, 38% acknowledged Carney had outperformed Lutnick, the first time a significant share of Trump's own base broke with the administration's framing. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board wrote that the debate had revealed a strategic vacuum at the heart of American trade policy that is costing American businesses, American workers, and American credibility by the hour. 9 Republican senators now publicly oppose the administration's approach, up from 7 after the Steele ultimatum. The Business Roundtable held a press conference in which the chair said directly, "We have been asking the White House for a resolution plan for 6 months. After last night, we understand why we haven't received one. There isn't one. There has never been one. American businesses will begin engaging directly with the Democratic Commerce Alliance framework to protect their supply chains, their workers, and their long-term competitiveness, with or without the support of an administration that has demonstrated it is unable to engage substantively with the most important economic crisis of our time." That statement, American business formally giving up on the administration, represented a fracture analysts described as irreparable within this presidential term. The S&P 500 dropped 2.8% in the 72 hours following the debate. The energy suspension, now in its 4th month, has cost American consumers an estimated $31 billion. The steel tariff is increasing American construction costs by an average of $53,000 per home. Natural gas futures for the winter are at their highest level in 20 years. And the Democratic Commerce Alliance now encompasses over half the global economy, with American businesses joining it independently because their own government cannot articulate a competing vision. The most integrated economic relationship in human history, the U.S.-Canada partnership built over 158 years, is unraveling not in a single dramatic break, but in a slow, compounding cascade of self-inflicted wounds. Trump sent his Commerce Secretary, the man the White House called the sharpest economic mind in the cabinet, to confront Mark Carney on live international television. Carney dismantled him so completely that the broadcast is being studied as a case study in asymmetric intellectual warfare. In 41 minutes, Lutnick failed to counter a single data point, failed to answer a 7-word question that exposed the absence of any American proposal, and sat in 8 seconds of silence that told 90 million viewers everything about the strategic void at the center of the world's most powerful government. Carney ended with 5 words, "Send someone who can say yes." That phrase now joins the 3 that preceded it. "I don't work for you." We weren't speaking to him. Thank you for the introduction. As the arc of a superpower that forgot the most fundamental rule of power. It is not enough to be strong. You must also be serious. You must also be competent. You must also have a plan. Strength without seriousness is bluster. Strength without competence is theater. Strength without a plan is a chair, empty, visible to the world, and impossible to fill once the world has seen that it is empty. The chair is empty. The world has seen it. The 90-day clock on the steel tariff is still ticking. The energy is still suspended. The diplomats are still gone. The alliance is still growing. And somewhere in Ottawa, a man who was supposed to be broken by American pressure is sitting quietly, waiting for someone who can say yes. He is still waiting. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.